With very few exceptions, Texas law requires that we call 811 and get a locate for any utilities before we dig. There's a 2-day limit on the time that they have to get this done, so you need to call at least 48 working hours before you get the chance to do this. You really don't want to take a chance with either your equipment hitting a high pressure line or else cutting a fiber optic line and knocking out the 911 system and the liability that goes with that. It's just not worth taking the chance on what you're doing. Before we get started, one of the things we want to do is actually go out and get a site survey after we've got a good locate on our utilities. We want to look, is it dry enough that we can cut our ditch? Is there room to put a flat bottom ditch in there? Does it need to be a V-bottom because of room consideration? Is there room to actually go with our dirt when we actually begin to move our material out of our bottom of our ditch? One of the things that's always a good idea to do is do a good pre-work inspection on your machine. Labor is one of the biggest costs of any budget. But if you've got some equipment repair because you didn't catch a problem starting off with either low oil, low hydraulics, a frayed belt, and you've got to send somebody out, or else you've got some repairs because of that, that can hurt the healthiest budget. So it's really a good idea to do a good solid pre-trip according to the manufacturer's specs, or if you haven't got the equipment book on there, then you can find some information usually from the manufacturer's website, as well as the UTA's putting out some stuff that'll help you do a good solid pre-trip. One of the things we want to be sure to check on any machine is the motor oil on there. It's always a good idea to pull it out, then wipe the stick, reinsert it, and then you can pull it out and check it, and we're right at the full mark on this machine, so we're in good shape on there. Other dipstick that you want to check in on this 12G is actually the transmission, and it's on the other side, and to get an accurate reading on the 12G, it actually needs to be running before you check the transmission to make sure the depth's on there. If you check it with it not running, it's going to show over full. One of the things to check is also your transmission dipstick. On the 12G, this is it here. You want to pull it out, you want to wipe it off. And if you'll notice on the dipstick right here, it says check with warm oil and engine running at low idle with transmission in neutral. If you check it with it not running, then it shows up almost 6 inches above the full mark. So that gives you a pretty good idea. Sometimes they'll have that actually on the dipstick. At other times you'll need to check your equipment manufacturer's manual to make sure you've got what you need on there. While we're here, something else that's on the checklist that's a good idea to keep an eye on is your battery compartment. Check the batteries for cables, make sure the cables are tight, make sure you haven't got a bunch of corrosion. You can check the tightness of your cables also while you're working there. Something to keep an eye on is the condition of your belts, whether they're tight or not. If they're not tight, you can end up with a problem with your electrical system not charging, as well as if it's slipping, you can end up with it overheating if you got it working in the heat of the summertime. There's a lot of variance in where to check stuff. On the 12G cat, your hydraulic is checked here in this sight glass, and it also makes a difference whether the machine is hot and been operating or whether it's still cold. If it's hot, it's going to have expanded some, and it'll be a little higher in the glass than if it's cold. It's a good idea at least once a week to actually pull the cover off and pull your air filter out on the air system, make sure it's still operating and hadn't stopped up. Dusty conditions, it can sneak up on you quicker than what you think it is. If you've got one of the rubber grommets on the newer ones, be sure and mash it and get any of the dirt out of it. Years ago, we used to blow those filters out. They've about decided in the industry that it's a lot better to just tap them and replace them, because if you get to blowing them out, if you're not careful, you can blow a hole in it. First thing you know, you've got dirt in your machine, and we don't want to go there. Some of the different manufacturers have got drains on the bottom of their water filters, or not water filters, fuel filters, where you can drain all any water out that's in there. Some of the manufacturers have actually got clear filters where you can see if you've got any sediment or any water that's accumulating in the bottom of the filter. That's always a good thing to do, because diesel and water does not play well together. Most of the newer machines on your radiator level, on your coolant level, have got a sight glass where you can actually see into them. Cat does on the newer cats. Some of them have got an overflow where you can, and a recovery tank where you can do that. If you've got an older machine that you need to actually pull the top off and look down in the radiator itself, if you can't comfortably hold your hand on top of that radiator cap, don't take it off. If it's under pressure, it can get really ugly and you can spend some time in the hospital with it. So keep that in mind. If you do need to check your coolant level, But if it's too worn to put your hand on it, don't take it off, even if you're using a rag or some other method. One of the things to watch for on maintainers is check the condition of your hoses, see if you've got any frayed or if you've got any that are leaking. The hoses can be frayed. Also keep an eye on your cylinders to see if you've got any seepage on there. There's a lot of cylinders checked. This particular 12G, if I've counted right, has 8 different cylinders that operates everything from your moldboard, tilt, shift, the moldboard lift, as well as your side shift, and then your articulation is also cylinder activated, as well as your rippers in the back. One thing that's really something that you might want to make a priority in your organization is the safety items on a maintainer. On these, it's a good idea to keep a first aid kit in them. You never know when you might need one. Also, a fire extinguisher in there could save your entity a lot of money if you run up on a bad situation. The other thing to keep an eye on safety is the slow moving one. You might check and see if you've got one, see if it's still where it reflects and where it shows up good, because that's one of the warnings that you've got coming in there, as well as strobe lights or flashing beacons that will help give you better visibility out on the roadways. Something in there else to check in your cab is check the condition of your seat belt. Are my glasses pretty well clean, or are they cracked? Is the mirrors on the cab still intact? Do the doors open and close like they should? This is just something that's good housekeeping and is the housekeeping good inside the maintainer. Something to check on your moldboard is to make sure your cutting edges is in good shape. This is especially something you've got to keep an eye at if you're blading on county roads. It's real easy if you're not careful to wear the center of the blades and not out on the ends. Also, while you're doing it, check the end bits, make sure that they're in good shape. Keep an eye on your moldboard for buildup on the material. And then before you load the machine, it's always a good idea to clean the loose material off the back of the machine. If you're fixing to crank up and go down the road or leaving the lot going someplace, clean the loose material off the back of the blade. That way you don't leave something there to bounce up for the traffic falling in behind you. Something to check for on your maintainers is always check the condition of your tires. How much tread depth have you got on there? If you're running the cleated type tires, you want them this direction on the rear, and then the ones on the front will actually be reversed, which helps hold the machine down, because these are pulling and that's pushed against when you're up there, and helps a little on your side slip. You want to check your air pressure, go according to the tire manufacturer as well as the equipment manufacturer's recommendations on there. If you happen to have a Caterpillar, you may have to either have an adapter or a larger tire gauge, because some of the cats have a larger valve stem than your traditional valve stem. But check your tire pressure. It can make a difference on how the machine handles and how it pulls according to how much inflation. Plus, if you run a tire underinflated, you'll have a chance of damaging your sidewalls. Also look for nicks, cuts in there. While you're at it, check your lug nuts. Just keep an eye on them. And if you see rust or something around there, it may mean you've got one loose. You can also check your rims there and make sure that you haven't got a problem with your rim, that you might accidentally have a rim cracked. This particular 12G has rippers on the back. They've got the ripper teeth pointed up, which is not a bad idea. They've got the scarifiers down. What you want to look for in your scarifiers is how much tip you've got left. The tips are a whole lot, I won't say cheaper, they're not as expensive as the shanks. And if you wear your tip too long, then you may end up having to replace the shank. These basically knock off with a hammer. It's a good idea to have some safety glasses on when you're there, but you can knock them off, then the new ones just slide up in place, and pressure will keep them in place there. If you are scarifying with that, it's not really something on the pre-trip, but if you've got the rippers down, be careful when you scarifying your base or subgrade material that you don't get out into the subgrade and begin to pull dirt up into your base material. That can create problems on your roadway. One thing to watch for on your tandems is that you've got a matched set of tires on here. I know everybody's budget's tight if you have to replace one tire, but these are actually hooked together by a chain inside the tandem there, and if you've got mismatched tires, you're going to create more tire wear, and you're also going to put pressure on that chain because they're not going to rotate at the same rate, and it's going to create a lot of extra pressure that doesn't need to be on the machine. Once you get all your pre-start stuff checked out, go ahead and crank the machine. Then you want to check all your warning lights, make sure your oil pressure comes up in the range it should be. You can begin to watch your temperature come up. If you've got pressure on either transmissions or hydraulics. If you got gauges showing them, watch for those. Watch for any warning lights that may come on there. If you've got an air brake system, make sure your air gauges are going to show on where they should be. Watch for warning lights in there. Then once you do have it cranked, go ahead and check with your key on, and while it's warming up, you've got a chance to check your running lights, make sure they're all working, as well as any beacons or strobe lights that you may have on the machine. It's a good time to check them while you're giving it time to warm up. If you're doing this in the winter time, you're going to take longer to warm the machine up than it is if you're doing it in July or August, where the ambient temperature overnight may not be within the lower 80s and your machine's still warm from the prior day. When you get down in the teens or lower, it's going to take a lot longer to warm it up. While you're warming the machine up, go ahead and cycle the hydraulics on all the cylinders to give it a chance to work the oil from the outer ends of the machine back to the hydraulic systems. Your radiator in your engine is going to warm up pretty quick because the thermostat's not going to circulate the water through the radiator until it begins to warm up. But your hydraulics, you've got a lot larger reservoir than you do on your coolant, and it's going to take longer to get your hydraulics warm. So you can check all your movements before you leave the lot every morning and make sure that everything's working like it should before you go, and it'll give you a chance to warm up. The flip side of the coin is, when you get ready to shut the machine down, give it a chance to idle and give the turbocharger a chance to spin down to where it's not turning the RPMs it should. Turbochargers typically run anywhere from 600 to 1,000 degrees, depending on the type and how hard you've been working the machines. And if you get a machine with a turbo that goes down, your power goes, and if it goes apart completely, then you can have some pretty high repair bills. One thing you need to check before you really begin to move the machine, go ahead and take it out of park and place it in reverse without it moving, to make sure your backup alarm is going to work, because you do want that, because you don't want to take a chance that somebody doesn't see you backing up where they can hear you, where you won't accidentally back over one of your co-workers or the public who might have been where they shouldn't have been. Also, something to check is make sure your parking brake's engaged, make sure it's working like it's supposed to, as well as once you begin to move, check your brakes and make sure they're actually going to work. On the systems that have air brakes, it's really important to make sure you haven't got water collected in the system. Some of the 120Hs have had some awfully expensive repair bills when they didn't get the water drained out of them, went into some severe cold conditions.
Now, this is too large a topic to cover in a video of this length, but if you would like more information or training, the University of Texas at Arlington LTAP program would be more than happy to help you. Please feel free to call us at the information provided below on the screen.